The manila envelope dropped onto my desk with a quiet thump that somehow felt louder than thunder. Inside sat a contract filled with figures that made my sight waver, 10 times my current pay, 10 times what I'd earned for 3 years as their lead algorithm researcher. The CEO, William Hartwell, hovered behind my chair as if waiting for me to collapse from gratitude. "Read it closely, Luna," he said, his breath warm against my ear in a way that made my skin crawl. "This is what loyalty looks like at our company. This is what happens when you prove yourself irreplaceable." I stared at those zeros. More money than most people ever see in a lifetime. Enough to buy a home, travel the globe, never stress over bills again. My fingers followed the edges of the paper while William watched, probably expecting tears of joy or stammered thanks. Instead, I sealed the envelope and slid it back across my desk toward him. "I'm flattered, but no thank you." His face cycled through 5 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, disbelief, anger, fear, then back to the polished smile he wore during board meetings. "Luna, I don't think you understand. This isn't just any offer. You're the only person who fully understands the breakthrough algorithm we're launching with the IPO. Without you, we're facing months of delays, maybe years. Do you know what that means?" I knew exactly what it meant. I'd been counting on it. Before I go deeper into this story, could you take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from? Because I want to know where my story is reaching around the world. And please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell, because what I'm about to tell you next will change how you think about justice forever. My name is Luna Chen, and 15 years ago, William Hartwell murdered my father. Not with a weapon or poison, but with something just as lethal: greed. Back then, William ran a different company called Innovative Solutions. My father, David Chen, had spent 7 years building revolutionary software that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy. His small startup, Chen Analytics, was his entire world. He'd mortgaged our house twice to fund it, worked 18-hour days in our garage, while my mother brought him coffee, and I did homework at his feet. The software worked. It worked so well that major investment firms started calling. Dad was so thrilled he could barely sleep. He'd finally done it. He said he'd created something that would change our lives forever. William Hartwell learned about Dad's software through industry contacts. Instead of making a fair offer to license or partner, he chose to take everything. First, William poached Dad's 3 key employees with offers they couldn't refuse. Then he filed 17 separate patent disputes, claiming Dad's software violated technologies William's company had supposedly developed first. Of course, those patents were filed after Dad had already been demonstrating his software, but William had expensive lawyers who knew how to blur timelines. While Dad scrambled to defend himself in court, William launched a nearly identical product marketed with the same language Dad had been using in his presentations. When potential investors saw that a major company was already selling the same technology, they lost interest in Dad's startup. The legal fees drained our savings. Dad had to lay off his remaining staff. The stress gave him chronic insomnia and chest pains that he ignored because he couldn't afford a doctor. My mother began working double shifts at the hospital just to keep food on our table. 6 months after William released his stolen product, Dad collapsed in our driveway while taking out the trash. Massive heart attack. He was 43 years old. I was 12, standing at our kitchen window, watching paramedics try to bring him back to life on our front lawn. I remember thinking that if I focused hard enough, if I believed strongly enough, I could make his chest rise and fall again. But belief doesn't restart hearts, and Dad died before the ambulance reached the hospital. William's company went public 18 months later. The stolen software became the backbone of a tech empire worth billions. Meanwhile, my mother and I lost our home and moved in with my aunt in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than laughter. At Dad's funeral, I made a promise as dirt struck his casket. Someday I would make William Hartwell understand what it felt like to lose everything. Someday he would know that the person destroying his world was David Chen's daughter. It took me 15 years to keep that promise. I spent high school earning perfect grades while working nights at a grocery store to help mom with rent. I studied computer science at State University on scholarships, graduating summa cum laude. I got my PhD in algorithmic development from a prestigious program, writing my dissertation on predictive market analysis. Every move was deliberate, every achievement crafted to build the exact resume William Hartwell's company would find irresistible. 3 years ago, I applied for a research position at Hartwell Dynamics under my married name, Luna Park. I'd been briefly married to a college classmate, solely so I could change my surname and erase any connection to David Chen. The marriage lasted just long enough for the paperwork to clear. William personally interviewed me for the role. He sat across from me in his glass-walled office, completely unaware he was looking at the daughter of the man he had destroyed. I answered his technical questions flawlessly, demonstrated my mastery of advanced algorithms, and accepted his offer with a firm handshake. "Welcome to the family," he said. I wanted to throw up. For 3 years, I became the perfect employee. I solved problems no one else could crack. I developed system improvements that saved the company millions. I worked weekends and holidays, staying late to debug code and optimize processes. I made myself absolutely indispensable. More importantly, I grew close to William's son. Trevor Hartwell is 21 now, a business major at an elite university. When he began interning at his father's company during summers, I volunteered to mentor him. William was delighted that his star researcher wanted to help shape his son's understanding of the business world. Trevor is nothing like his father. He's thoughtful, ethical, genuinely interested in using technology to help people rather than simply amass wealth. During our mentoring sessions, I taught him about responsible leadership, about how truly great companies treat employees and competitors with respect. I told him stories about small startups crushed by corporate giants, about brilliant inventors who lose everything to predatory business practices. I never mentioned my father by name, but I could see Trevor absorbing every lesson, beginning to question things he'd always taken for granted about his father's methods. Last month, Trevor came to me shaken by something he'd overheard at a family dinner. His father had been bragging about acquiring a competitor's intellectual property years ago, about outmaneuvering some naive startup founder who didn't understand how real business works. "It doesn't sound right," Trevor told me. "Dad made it sound like he was proud of destroying someone's life's work. That's not innovation. That's just theft, isn't it?" I looked into his earnest, troubled eyes and felt something I hadn't expected: pride. This young man had developed the moral compass his father completely lacked. In trying to guide him away from William's path, I'd created someone who would judge William Hartwell by the same standards David Chen had lived by. The IPO launch is scheduled for next month. 3 years of development, hundreds of millions in investor commitments, all dependent on the algorithm I've spent these years perfecting. An algorithm that, ironically, is built on the same principles my father developed 15 years ago. William has no idea he's been constructing his new empire on the mathematical foundation of the man he murdered. Yesterday, when he slid that contract across my desk, I realized the moment had finally arrived. Not just the moment to walk away and watch his company collapse, but something far more devastating. Trevor was supposed to meet me after his father's office visit to discuss his senior thesis project. As William stood there waiting for my response to his 10 times salary offer, I heard familiar footsteps in the hallway outside my office. "Mr. Hartwell?" I said quietly. "Before I give you my final answer, there's something you need to know about who I really am." His eyebrows lifted slightly, probably expecting me to mention a competing offer he could outbid. "My name isn't Luna Park, it's Luna Chen. David Chen was my father." The color drained from William's face so fast I thought he might collapse. His mouth opened and closed as if he were trying to speak underwater. 15 years ago, you stole his software and destroyed his company. The stress of fighting your legal challenges and watching his life's work vanish killed him. I was 12 years old when I watched paramedics try to restart his heart in our driveway. William grabbed the edge of my desk to steady himself. That's impossible. I'm David Chen's daughter. The same David Chen whose predictive algorithm became the foundation of your success. The same man whose patents you challenged until he couldn't afford to defend them. The same brilliant mind whose work you've been profiting from for over a decade. The footsteps in the hallway stopped, and through my office's glass wall, I saw Trevor standing frozen just outside the door, close enough to hear every word. William's gaze followed mine to his son, and I watched realization hit him like a physical blow. Trevor wasn't overhearing this by accident. This was happening exactly when and where I'd planned it. Trevor, I said gently, never taking my eyes off William's face. I'd like you to meet the real William Hartwell, the man who destroyed my family and built his fortune on my father's stolen work. Trevor's face passed through the same sequence of emotions I'd seen on his father's, but where William's expression settled into frantic calculation, Trevor's hardened into something that made my chest ache with satisfaction, disappointment, pure and devastating disappointment in the man he'd admired his entire life. "Dad?" Trevor whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is she telling the truth?" William opened his mouth to answer, but I raised the contract before he could speak. "This is your offer, Mr. Hartwell. 10 times my salary to stay and save your IPO, to help you profit even more from my father's work, to be complicit in the same system that killed him." I tore the contract in half, then in half again, letting the pieces drift onto my desk like autumn leaves. I quit. The silence afterward was suffocating. Trevor stared at his father like he was seeing a stranger for the first time. William's hands shook as he reached for the torn pieces, as if reassembling them could undo what had just happened. But I wasn't finished. 3 years of planning had led to this moment, and I intended to savor every second of William Hartwell, realizing his past had finally caught up with him. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning inside me. "The algorithm your entire IPO depends on, the one meant to make you billions, I've been building a fatal flaw into it for the past 6 months. Something that won't appear in testing, but will cause catastrophic failures once deployed at scale." William's face drained of color. "You're lying. You wouldn't sabotage your own work." "My own work?" I laughed, sharper than I meant to. "This was never my work, William. It was always my father's. I just spent 3 years perfecting his vision and making sure that when you tried to steal from the Chen family again, it destroyed you instead of us." Trevor stepped into my office, his eyes locked on his father. "Dad, you need to explain this now." "Son, listen to me," William said, his voice breaking. "Business was different back then. Competition was brutal. Sometimes you had to make difficult decisions to survive." "Difficult decisions?" Trevor shot back. "You mean stealing someone's life's work and driving them to death?" I watched William scramble for words that didn't exist. "The flawed algorithm launches with your IPO," I continued calmly. "At first, everything will look perfect. Investors will celebrate, stock prices will surge. But after about 30 days of real-world trading volume, the system will start producing erratic predictions. By day 60, it will recommend investments that lose money 90% of the time." William collapsed into the chair across from my desk. "Luna, please think about this. This isn't just about me. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. Retirement funds, college savings, entire futures depend on this company." "Like my father's future depended on his company?" I replied. "Like my mother's retirement depended on the house we lost when you destroyed us?" Trevor stared at his father, shaken. "How many other families, Dad? How many people like Luna's father did you crush to build this empire?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered, because we all knew the truth. David Chen hadn't been the first, and he wouldn't have been the last. "I can fix this," William said suddenly, turning to me with desperate eyes. "I can make it right. Name your price, Anything. I don't want your money. Then what? I stood and walked to my office window, looking down at the parking lot where employees arrived for another ordinary workday, unaware their company was built on my father's grave. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything you worked for. I want you to understand that the person destroying your world is someone you created through your own cruelty. And most of all, I want your son to see exactly who you really are. Trevor's voice was quiet but firm. Luna, is there any way to stop the algorithm failure? I turned back to face them both. The flawed code is embedded in 17 different subroutines across 12 separate modules. Removing it would require rebuilding the entire system from scratch, which would take at least 8 months. Your IPO deadline is 3 weeks away. William buried his face in his hands. This will bankrupt the company. Everything I'd built, everything you'd built on my father's stolen work, I corrected. But the employees, Luna, the innocent people who work here, who have families to feed. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something that might have been doubt. I thought about Janet in accounting who always remembered my birthday, about Marcus in security who walked me to my car during late nights, about the cleaning staff who left small notes of encouragement on my desk. Then I thought about my father dying alone in our driveway while William Hartwell celebrated his stolen success. You should have thought about innocent people 15 years ago. Trevor stepped closer to my desk. Luna, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what my father did to your family, but please, isn't there another way? Some kind of justice that doesn't destroy thousands of lives? Looking into Trevor's eyes was like looking into a mirror of my 12-year-old self. That same desperate hope that somehow, if you just believed hard enough, you could fix the unfixable. There is one way, I said slowly. Both William and Trevor leaned forward. I've documented everything, every piece of stolen code, every copied algorithm, every patent challenged illegally. I have proof this entire company is built on intellectual property theft. I also have recordings of William bragging about destroying small competitors, including my father. William's breathing grew shallow. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice, William. You can let the IPO proceed and watch your company collapse spectacularly when the algorithm fails, dragging thousands of innocent people down with you. Or you can do something you've never done in your entire career, which is tell the truth. The office went silent except for the hum of computers and the distant traffic below. You're going to call an emergency board meeting, I continued. You're going to confess that the core technology this company is built on was stolen from David Chen. You're going to publicly acknowledge that his work made your success possible, and you're going to establish a foundation in his name that helps small tech entrepreneurs defend themselves against corporate predators like you. William shook his head frantically. That would destroy my reputation. The board would fire me immediately. I'd lose everything. Exactly. Trevor watched with growing understanding. But the company could survive if you tell the truth, couldn't it? The employees would keep their jobs. I nodded. If William comes clean before the IPO, the company can restructure, properly license the original technology posthumously from my father's estate, and rebuild with honest leadership. It would be humiliating and expensive, but not catastrophic. And if he doesn't, then in 3 weeks when the IPO launches, I'll release all my evidence to the financial press anyway. But by then, it will be too late to save the company or its employees. William looked back and forth between his son and me like a trapped animal. This is extortion. No, Trevor said quietly. This is justice. The disappointment in Trevor's voice was more devastating than any financial loss could ever be. I could see William finally understanding what he was truly losing. Not just money or reputation, but his son's respect, the one thing he'd never considered valuable. I need time to think, William said. You have until 5 o'clock today, I replied. After that, I submit my resignation letter to the board, along with a detailed explanation of why I can no longer work for a company built on stolen technology. William stood unsteadily and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Why did you really come here, Luna? If you wanted to destroy me, you could have done it anonymously. Why reveal yourself? I considered the question for a long moment. Because I wanted you to know that David Chen's daughter grew up. I wanted you to understand that every brilliant algorithm you profited from came from the mind of the man you killed. And I wanted you to realize that by mentoring your son, I've raised him to be everything you're not. Trevor stepped forward. Dad, Luna's right about all of it. I've learned more about ethical leadership from her in 3 years than I ever learned from you. William's face collapsed, and in that instant he looked far older than his 62 years, older, smaller, and more broken than I'd ever imagined possible. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Luna. I never considered that David had a family. I told myself it was just business. My father used to say that how you treat people when you think no one is watching is who you really are. Today, your son is watching. William left my office without another word. Trevor stayed. Behind for a moment, his eyes filled with something that looked like grief. For what it's worth, he said quietly, your father would be proud of who you became. At 5:15 that afternoon, William Hartwell called an emergency board meeting. By 7 o'clock, news broke that Hartwell Dynamics was postponing its IPO indefinitely while launching an internal review of its intellectual property foundations. By 9 o'clock, William had submitted his resignation as CEO. By the next morning, every major tech publication was running the story of how a billionaire executive had confessed to building his empire on stolen technology, and how the daughter of his victim had spent 3 years methodically engineering his downfall. The company survived under new leadership and proper licensing agreements. Hartwell Dynamics restructured and eventually went public 18 months later. Most employees kept their jobs. The David Chen Foundation for Ethical Innovation now provides legal support for small tech entrepreneurs facing corporate intimidation. Trevor transferred to a different university to finish his degree, telling reporters he needed to build an identity separate from his father's legacy. We still exchange emails occasionally, and he's planning to start a nonprofit focused on tech ethics after graduation. William Hartwell lost everything he believed mattered: his reputation, his fortune, his standing in the industry. But he gained something he'd never had before: his son's respect for doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. As for me, I've started my own consulting firm, helping small companies protect their intellectual property. The irony isn't lost on me that my first major client was a startup developing predictive algorithms. Some people might say my revenge was too severe, that 15 years of planning and 3 years of deception make me just as ruthless as William. But when I visit my father's grave now, I can finally tell him that the man who killed him knows exactly what it feels like to lose everything to someone more patient, more clever, and more determined. Justice doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it looks like a 12-year-old girl who refuses to let her father's death be meaningless. Sometimes it takes 15 years and requires becoming exactly the kind of person your enemy would never suspect. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying someone completely, but forcing them to live with the truth of who they really are. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything to me and helps ensure stories like my father's aren't forgotten. Share this with someone who needs to hear that patience and determination can defeat even the most powerful enemies. And tell me in the comments what justice means to you, because I read every single one, and your words remind me why telling this story was worth the wait.